He's Rick Gates. He's a former deputy campaign chairman for Donald Trump back in 2016, and he joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Rick.
Good to be with you, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about that NATO summit, which has been hailed as a great success by everybody. We'd had Keir Starmer in the House of Commons. Occasionally he wanders back into Britain to actually try and attempt to run the country. When Donald Trump's arrived home to a tweet from his own White House saying, "Daddy's home." First of all, I must ask you, and I know this is only sort of periphery stuff, it's not the substance, but what did you make of the daddy analogy? And let's have a little watch and listen for those who somehow have managed to miss it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's watch and listen.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language to get
to use strong. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
Well, he was talking about Israel and Iran, of course. Rick Gates, what did you make of that analogy?
Well, here in the United States, most of us are looking at Marco Rubio's reaction during the press conference yesterday when a Sky News reporter asked that very question. From our perspective, it is quite humorous, but I think it also shows kind of the charm offensive that NATO and Mark Rutte in particular were trying to put on, for Donald Trump. They always haven't gotten along. Yeah. There's been issues, but I think, in terms of President Trump's signature issue, even back from 2016 when he wanted European countries to pay more in NATO fees, well, guess what? He got that yesterday. So, yeah, absolutely resounding success for him over there. And then obviously on the sidelines meeting with President Zelensky, I think that meeting went well, certainly better than the one in the White House.
I mean, it's a low bar. It's a low bar, Rick. But I've got another clip actually. But we'll move on from that. The reporter asking him about whether he regards his NATO allies as kind of children. You say it's a big win, 5%. It's not on defence. It's not a percentage of GDP going on defence. It includes 1.5% of that. Is on security, like border security. A third runway at Heathrow would count as that. Us actually stopping some migrants into the country on Channel boats from Calais would count as that. And even the 3% that we're planning, 3.5 we're planning to spend, even that includes stuff that doesn't have any contribution towards our fighting ability. Is this all just smoke and mirrors and everyone playing your president?
Yeah, look, I think we'll see over time. I think, that was another question, what's going to happen after, President Trump's out of office? Is NATO really going to adhere to this new policy? So I think time will tell. But I think from the American perspective, one of the things that we were frustrated about is that it seemed like America was bearing the burden, the financial burden for NATO.
Well, you were. You are.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, paying up to 2/3 of the amount. So at least now from whether it's optical or whether it's a practical and it comes to fruition, the Americans are seeing this as a huge win for Donald Trump. And more importantly, a campaign promise that Americans' burden would be reduced. And now with the economic situation the way it is, it's a good thing for Americans.
Well, indeed. It was a wake-up call for Europe as well about needing to provide our own defence. In terms of where we are with Iran and Israel, we've had some glorious statements from the Iranian Ayatollah, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, basically praising the victory for Iran, insisting that the Americans have, he said, we've delivered a hand slap to America's face, and that Donald Trump needed to exhibit his showmanship, but the US couldn't achieve much when they struck Iran's nuclear sites. They could not achieve anything, could not reach the goal they sought, and they exaggerate to conceal the truth and keep it hidden. He said, and the aggression against Iran, he warned, will come at a great cost. Tough words from the Ayatollah, but do you think they could be matched by action?
Not from not Iran, absolutely not. I don't think they have much weaponry left. I think they have, some maybe ballistic missiles. But I think at the end of the day, look, you're making these type of statements. We're talking about it here in the U.S. It's very reminiscent of Iraq. Remember when Saddam Hussein said it's going to be the mother of all battles? Yeah. And then as soon as the U.S. tanks roll in, everybody surrenders.
6 weeks, I think it took, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of over here. That's how we're portraying it. Look, their military capabilities are absolutely diminished. Their nuclear capabilities, in the words of President Trump, are obliterated. We'll get more intelligence on that as the days unfold. But at the end of the day, also telegraphing the missile launch, on the air base in Qatar, and kind of then
that was a pretend response, wasn't it?
Exactly right. And so all those indicators lead to, if they were really going to do something, then either why not do it, or do you even have the capability to do it? And I think the consensus is they don't. So the question is, what's what's going to happen inside of Iran. That's kind of what we're all waiting for. You have kind of the political elites that seem to be very frustrated and tired of the Ayatollah. You hear about, him potentially making a deal with Russia to, exile there. I think the next few days are going to be very critical to that. But look, I think this is all rhetoric. I think whatever the Ayatollah thinks he has to do to remain in power is probably where this rhetoric is coming from. But it's very, very light, and I think it's falling on deaf ears. I
had got into a little bit of a little spat with Sebastian Gorka, a senior aide to Donald Trump, yesterday about, the thing I find so frustrating with Donald Trump is he's totally bang on 100% right when it comes to Israel and the threat from Iran. I love his support for Israel. He's so clear-cut, it's a black and white issue. I don't understand why he doesn't understand that Ukraine is also a black and white issue, that he should be supporting Ukraine, and that the same sort of show of force to Iran would also would work with Putin in Russia as well. Why does he see Ukraine's predicament? And he was very sympathetic to Ukrainian journalists who said that, she and her daughter had left the country. She was asking him at the NATO press conference yesterday, but her husband was a soldier in Ukraine. He was very supportive. Everyone felt there was quite a softening. He was much less disparaging of Zelensky and Ukraine and what the situation was. There's been a bit more calling out of Vladimir Putin. But why does he not see Ukraine in the same way that he sees Israel?
Well, look, I think part of it is historical in the way that he approached these two issues. At the time of his first administration, there wasn't this war between Ukraine and Russia, and he felt that
they'd already invaded Crimea.
Right. Well, remember, that was under Obama. That was not under...
Yeah, I know, but they had already invaded Crimea.
Yeah. So they absolutely. But I think at the end of the day, President Trump is growing frustrated with Vladimir Putin, no question about it. And I think that you are going to see, more action. There's talk about another round of sanctions on President Putin and a lot of his allies. So look, I think it's there. Look, I think the president wanted to see this resolved as quickly as possible. Clearly, that hasn't happened. You saw him make a comment about that yesterday.
Well, saying, he was told, the 24 hours he was going to resolve it. He said, it was sarcasm. Oh.
And look, I think at the end of the day, there will be some sort of resolution at some point. But unlike the Ayatollah, who basically has resigned to the fact that he has zero military capabilities and looks to be surrendering, even though he's not going to use that reference, Vladimir Putin doesn't. He's a different guy. It's a sign of weakness. The minute Vladimir Putin shows any sign of weakness, you know this from the region, it's strength. And if he doesn't project strength, he's going to get ousted by his own people at some juncture. So I think that there's another game here, and I don't think Russia can maintain what they're doing. I mean, look at what they're bringing in from North Korea. They don't have the resources. I think one of the most surprising things the world saw when this war broke out is how diminished Russia's military capabilities are.
Yes.
Even though they have a big nuclear arsenal, their kind of ground forces became pretty irrelevant.
I mean, and their losses compared to the Ukrainians are quite astonishing, aren't they? Just coming back to Donald Trump and back in America, he's back in the country. He's been at the G7 summit. He's been at the NATO summit. They know they shorten these summits because they know he's not interested in all these supranational bodies, and he's much more in like one-on-one deals and like. How is all of this going down with the American people in terms of the polling, in terms of how he's handled what he's done with Israel, what he's doing with Ukraine? How is this all going down?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Israel-Iran thing was pretty interesting. Going into it, before a decision was made, there seemed to be a lot of, animosity, a lot of opposition to it. Then when he made the decision to go in, drop the bombs, the success has been resounding. Like, a lot of Americans are siding with him, not on the idea of going to war. And even President Trump says, we don't want to go to war. We don't want to put boots on the ground. I think he's navigated this pretty deftly in terms of taking out Iran's nuclear capabilities, but at the same time making sure that commitment not to go to war has been in the main messaging. And so far, the polling is very good in his favor. Now we turn back to domestic issues. We're getting ready to pass our big budget bill, our one big, beautiful budget bill, hopefully this weekend. And that will be the focus moving forward. Look, we have midterms in about a year and a half. That is all going to be really based on the economy and what that state is here in America.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, the economy stupid. There we are. Thank you very much. It is good to talk to you, Rick Gates, who's a former deputy campaign chair for Donald Trump back in 2016. Can I come to you, Philip Ingram, in terms of talking about the success or not in Iran? We had these claims that the nuclear sites had been obliterated. Then we were told that the uranium had been sort of disappeared off in the days beforehand. Then we had that internal report that was leaked saying that actually just put back the nuclear program by maybe a few months. Today, all over the night, we've had the CIA report saying there was a lot of damage. Who do we believe and how does anyone know? Because unless you're actually presumably there, you don't know what you've destroyed, surely.
Well, exactly. Intelligence is assessment, and it's very easy whenever things get leaked for elements to be taken out of context and then used as this shows that we haven't done it.
We might have seen that in the dodgy dossier.
A classic example was the dodgy dossier, the 45-minute rule, because I saw the intelligence, and the intelligence was right, and it said 45 minutes, but it caveated it only when weapons have been outloaded, authority had been passed down, and stocks were sitting in front of the guns. And then went on to say none of this has happened. All of that was taken out whenever the dossier went to become the dodgy dossier. Yeah. So I actually believe Donald Trump. I believe the bomb damages that's coming in. You will have set the program back, because it's not just the depleted uranium itself, it's the ability to process it into weapons.
It turns out it's much harder than a lot of people think. Yes. And I know it's 60%, it's not 90%, which is what you actually need. But
you need the specialist kits,
the 60% is the hardest bit. Yeah. But you're never going to get rid of the know-how, the knowledge. Correct. You can get it. They can pay new scientists.
The best quote I saw on social media was, "You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube."
This is so true.
So they've got the knowledge. Even if they've got the uranium, they may not have the centrifuges to get it to 90%.
You need to have people in power who don't want to annihilate Israel and Western civilization. Yes. That would be a good start. But there'll still be plenty of others who do. Correct. But you do need many billions, and you do need the know-how, and you need as many checks on this happening.
And there's a danger that another country may give Iran a nuclear warhead, and this is where the intelligence agencies will be monitoring it very, very closely indeed.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed.